Unexplained horrors revealed. Sinister encounters with the cursed night marchers at Pearl Harbor. Rebecca had always felt secure in her little corner of Pearl Harbor. The sun rose bright over the suburban sprawl, casting warm light over her life as a waitress and single mother. But that security began to shatter the night her teenage son, Ethan, stumbled into the world of the night marchers. Ghostly figures said to once be Hawaiian warriors haunting the streets under the full moon, they sought vengeance on anyone they encountered. She dismissed the tales, childhood superstition, nothing more. But darkness creeps in where light once thrived. When the moon swelled fat and full, shadows crawled unseen through the evening air. A low wail echoed around her, splitting the calm of familiar streets. The calm chatter of her neighbors shifted to hushed whispers tinged with dread. Her heart raced in her chest. Did they know something she didn't? Did they, too, feel the oppressive weight of fear settling over their homes? The night brought a frantic call from a fellow server, an unnerving account of families who dared to question the local authorities. Strange happenings. Weird noises. Almost a warning, tied to Ethan's obsessive research into the night marchers. The diner staff's laughter turned into fearful glances, and Rebecca felt a bite of panic gnawing at her. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As she walked home that evening, strange sounds echoed through the streets. Was that a thud? A whisper? She turned quickly, hoping to catch glimpses of what lurked in the shadows. The fear clung to her, ice cold against her skin. Then the unsettling truth hit her: Ethan was missing. He had sworn to uncover the real story of the night marchers, and now, she felt a sick twist in her gut. The community she loved was shifting, fraying at the edges beneath the burden of dreaded stories. In a haze, she roamed the streets, tight with shadows and silence, a specter of dread pressing in around her. Each creak of the floorboards beneath her leading back to her home was a reminder: she was alone. The moon lit her path, but its glow cast even darker shadows. She decided to chase after the echoing footsteps, a rhythmic thud. Heart pounding, she called out, "Ethan." But only silence answered. Way too close now, she sensed the haunting presence, shadows colliding in spaces beyond her eyesight. A chill danced along her spine. The thuds grew louder, marching closer, chanting in a language both ancient and terrifying. As Rebecca turned to run, her move felt futile. The figures weren't just about to haunt her, they were coming for her. With every breath, she felt the cold grip of panic wrapping around her heart. Ethan was out there, somewhere close, teetering on the edge of a dark truth. Shadows surged ahead, and in that breathless moment, she realized she wasn't just facing a legend. What if the night marchers were not merely ghosts? What if they were here to reclaim what the living dared to forget? The sound of their warmth echoed through her mind, a warning that made her tremble. Time was running out. Would she be strong enough to face the terrifying reality she had ignored? The air grew thicker as Rebecca ran, her heart pounding in sync with the distant thuds of the approaching figures. Each beat was a reminder of the peril lurking behind her. Shadows twisted and coiled, creeping closer and consuming the pale light. She slapped her palm against the cool metal of a lamp post, using it to change direction, her breath coming in short gasps. "Ethan!" She cried out again, voice raw and desperate, but the emptiness of the surrounding street swallowed her cries. Something primal in her knew it was not just her son who was lost, it was a piece of herself, hanging precariously with every step into the encroaching dark. When panic clawed at her heart, she pushed through the fear, remembering his face, that bright smile. Could he still be out there? The thought of him alone, facing the nightmarish unknown, made her blood run cold, her mind raced, scrambling for a refuge. She thought of the community center nearby, a place filled with warmth and laughter, now only shadowed outlines in the dark. If she could just reach it, maybe there were others there too. They would help. Maybe Ethan was already there. That glimmer of hope pulled her forward, even as another loud chant rang across the ground behind her, sharper, thicker with anger. The thuds transformed into a wild rhythm, like a war drum echoing from her childhood tales, and she felt the air grow heavy with ancient condemnation. Run, Rebecca! Her instincts screamed, finding the sudden surge of survival. As she darted around a corner, the wind picked up behind her, swirling with a hiss that almost whispered her name. It was chillingly familiar, a voice coding her thoughts with dread. Each step felt like a descent deeper into treachery. She stumbled, nearly falling as shadows seemed to reach towards her, their forms dark and ominous, pushing back the terror that threatened to consume her. She pressed on, fueled by sheer determination. The center was only a few blocks away, but her legs felt like lead. She could see the retro neon sign flickering faintly in the distance, a beacon in her storm. Just then, a blinding light cut through the darkness, illuminating the dusty street. A car appeared at the intersection, headlights ablaze, and she raised her hand in an instinctive plea for help. But as the vehicle slowed, it didn't stop. Instead, it veered away, disappearing into the shadows just as quickly as it arrived, leaving her feeling more isolated than before. The chanting grew louder, vibrating through the ground. Just when Rebecca thought she couldn't bear it any longer, she saw a figure standing at the edge of the light, cloaked in shadow. It was tall and imposing, its presence suffocating. The soft glow of the moon caught the edges of a worn helmet, and she froze as recognition coursed through her. Ethan wore that helmet in all his reenactments for school projects. Ethan? She gasped, her throat dry, stepping closer, desperation clawing at her. But before she could take another breath, the shadow lifted its gaze, revealing hollow, sunken eyes filled with a resentment that twisted her stomach. A chilling sense of foreboding gripped her. This wasn't her son. With a scream, she turned to run again, but the ground beneath her trembled, the shadows shifting and contorting. Every step forward felt like a step back, as if the earth itself conspired to hold her in place. Becky! The voice echoed from behind, carrying a familiar tone that made her pause. Turning, she saw another figure rushing toward her. It was Ethan. Mom! You have to run! He shouted, panic etched across his face, but he wasn't alone. Behind him, the night marchers began to materialize, spectral warriors rising, their chants reaching a harrowing crescendo that sent shivers racing up her spine. With hearts pounding wildly, hands grasping each other, Rebecca felt the crushing weight of their curse bear down on her. Would they be able to escape the rising tide of vengeance before it consumed them both? As the darkness swirled closer, she only had one thought: what would happen if they fell into its depths? The shadows beckoned, stretching their cold fingers toward her, as horror loomed over them like a storm ready to break. Rebecca steeled herself, the fight for their lives was just beginning. Would she uncover the truth of what tormented the night marchers, or would she and Ethan become a part of their haunting legacy? The tendrils of the unknown gripped her as they drew closer. There was no more running, only one desperate choice left. Adrenaline surged as Rebecca turned to her son, desperation spurring her on. Ethan, run! She yelled, pulling him close. The figures were no longer just shadows, they were manifestations of rage, wailing voices that clawed at her sanity. Each chant dripped with fury, echoing from the depths of despair. Mom! We have to go! Ethan cried, his voice breaking through her panic. Together, they took a single hopeful step back toward the community center, but the ground quaked beneath them. It felt alive, as if the very earth was angry at their defiance. The specters surged forward, their hollow eyes capturing the moonlight. Rebecca's heart raced, she could almost feel their cold breath. They were drawn to Ethan, their cries twisting into something almost human, yet utterly foreign. She grasped his hand tighter, her fingers tingling with a raw, electric fear. Over there. Ethan pointed, eyes wide with terror. Somewhere in the darkness, a single door stood ajar, an invitation into the unknown. Was it a safe haven, or a trap laid just for them? With no time to think, Rebecca's instinct screamed for action. they sprinted towards the door, bursting through as the relentless chanting reached a fever pitch outside. The room was filled with shadows, cluttered with old memorabilia from the days of laughter and joy. The once vibrant colors now a dull gray pictures of children playing, families gathering. "Is anyone here?" Rebecca shouted into the silent void, her voice echoing back at her. She scanned the room, filled with the remnants of lives once lived, now eerily still. The air was thick with dust. "Mom, look!" Ethan pointed at the back wall, where a faded mural depicted the night marchers. Their faces contorted in rage, bodies frozen in a lonely dance of vengeance. Rebecca swallowed hard, even the mural pulsed with despair, watching her helplessly. Shadows trailed at the edges of her vision, creeping in on them. Panic clawed at her throat. "We can't stay here. We have to keep moving." Before she could take another step, the door slammed shut with a violent bang. The noise reverberated like a death knell, sending shivers up her spine. The latch clicked, sealing them in darkness. The chanting reached a fever pitch, vibrating through every inch of the small room. "Mom, what are we going to do?" Ethan's voice trembled, drenched in fear he shouldn't have known. Rebecca, her heart pounding, glanced around. The room seemed darker now, crushed under the weight of their encroaching doom. "We need to find another way out." She spotted a small window above. It was her only hope. "Help me." She pushed Ethan toward it, scrambling on top of a worn-out table. Their breaths mingled as she hoisted him up, just as something scratched at the door, a thin, slithering sound that sent chills rushing down her spine. "Go, Ethan. Climb out," she urged, her voice cracking as the door splintered from attacks. He squeezed through the narrow opening, gasping for air. Just then, a flurry of violent shadows spiraled in the air, enveloping her as she reached for him. "Mom, hurry!" he shouted, the terror in his voice slicing through her like a knife. She made one last desperate lunge toward him but felt the weight of the darkness pulling her down. It coiled like a serpent around her legs, tugging her back as the haunting wails of the night marchers echoed in a chorus of sorrow, loss, vengeance. As she struggled against the unseen force, her eyes locked with Ethan's, the last glimmer of hope between them. "Ethan! Don't leave me!" With that, she felt herself being dragged into the void, the world fading with every gasp she took. Just as her fingertips slipped away from his grip, a single thought echoed in her mind: there was no escape. What would it mean to be taken, to become just another whispered tale of the night marchers? In that moment, darkness enveloped her entirely, but a flicker of light erupted in her chest. Was that Ethan's sacrifice, or a new beginning that she could not yet see? Could she confront the truth before the shadows swallowed her whole? Or would they become the echoes of a story never told? Rebecca plunged into a cold abyss, the darkness thickening around her like tar. The weight of despair pressed down, suffocating. At first, there was no sound, just the drumming of her own heart stopping in protest. No soft flutter of hope, no reassurance. Just a disquiet so profound it clawed at her from within. Suddenly, the shadows peeled back, and she found herself gasping for air, breathing in a mix of stale remnants of what once was fear, melancholy, loss. The room was still present, yet distorted. The walls seemed to close in on her, murals twisting into grotesque shapes that mocked her plight. Rebecca staggered to her feet, a feeling of vertigo passing over her as she looked for Ethan. "Ethan!" she called, her voice wavering. It swallowed by the empty air, drifting away before it could take root in the fabric of this place. She could hardly bear the silence. Was he still outside? Had he escaped? Rebecca felt a sharp tug at the edges of her sanity, the sensation of eyes watching her. Ghostly whispers swirled through the air, a cacophony of jumbled enlightenment and anguish. She could hardly decipher the words, but their tone was unmistakable. They were calling out to her. "Mom!" echoed faintly in the distance, but it was quickly snuffed out by the chaos around her. A sudden rush of wind coursed through the room, sending clouds of dust into the air. Shadows flickered, swirling like miniature black storms. The air crackled, something was shifting. "Ethan! Where are you?" Rebecca's desperation intensified, bordering on hysterical. She turned to face the door they had entered through, still firmly shut. The latch had locked them in, and she felt the weight of hopelessness crush her chest. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. Join us, they wrapped around her, slick and seductive, tempting her into understanding whatever fate awaited them. Rebecca fought to pull back, shaking her head, resisting the draw. A flicker of movement caught her eye. The mural pulsed, the figures twisting and writhing, their contorted faces morphing into anguished masks that seemed almost real. She stumbled back, the horror of realization hitting her like a violent wave. They were not just spirits but condemned souls trapped in this nightmare, desperate for release just like her. She approached the mural, her hand trembling as it hovered close to the surface. The night marcher's eyes held a sorrowful promise. "Wake our spirits, fulfill the curse," they whispered, drawing her in. A palpable energy pulsed from the wall, beckoning her to surrender, to let the shadows claim her as one of their own. "No!" she shouted, pulling away. "I want to become one of you." Suddenly, the room erupted in chaos. The air turned frigid, shadows slamming against the walls. The whispers erupted into screams, layering the air with collective rage, sorrow, and longing. The shadows leapt from the corners in dark claws, wrapping tightly around her body. Rebecca fought, kicking and thrashing against the weightless chains of despair, but they only tightened. Just when she began to think it was over, a brilliant light shot through the room, a beam so pure it cut through the shadows surrounding her. The voices fell silent, and the figures in the mural stilled, their eyes turning toward the light in fearful curiosity. "Mom!" The voice was clearer now, more distinct. Ethan stood outside the door, face pale but resolute. "Mom, I found a way." As the shadows writhed in agitation, Rebecca lunged toward the light, its warmth wrapping around her like a guardian. "Ethan, hurry. I'm right here." But the darkness surged, a wall of fury crashing against her as she reached for him. The shadows howled, incensed at the light, trying to draw their prey back into submission. "Don't leave me!" she screamed, but would she be able to escape this nightmare? The room trembled with the impending clash of light and shadow, and Rebecca fought to hold on to both the fading bond with her son and the growing realization of who she must become. In that moment, she sensed a choice closing in around her: stand firm and face the night marchers, or surrender everything to the void. Would the truth reveal itself in the clutches of despair? As the light flickered, it teased the edges of her vision, and her heart raced. What was the cost of survival? Would she rescue Ethan or risk everything to confront the darkness? The brightness radiating from the door grew brighter, reaching toward Rebecca like a tether of hope stretching across the abyss. But the shadows clung to her harder than ever, their cold tendrils squeezing her tighter, a chilling reminder that they weren't about to let her go. "Mom!" Ethan's voice rang out again, echoing with desperation. In her heart, a deep surge of maternal instinct clawed through the fog of fear. She couldn't lose him, not now. With one last effort, she summoned every ounce of will she could muster. "I'm coming, Ethan!" she screamed, her voice tearing through the chaos. The room shuddered with fury. The whispers transformed into a deafening roar, drowning out everything but the frantic thumping of her heart. Shadows twisted angrily, near sentient, as if they knew their prey was slipping away. With a shake, she tore at the weight binding her. It was as though she was ripping the very threads of despair, a power she didn't know she had. In that moment, her hand finally broke free from the grasping shadows. She reached toward the light, fingertips trembling on the edge of warmth. "Ethan! Grab my hand!" Then, in a surge of terror, a dark figure emerged from the swirling shadows, a grotesque amalgamation of the tortured souls from the mural. Its eyes glowed a sickly yellow, piercing through the darkness, locking onto Rebecca's with a predatory hunger. "Leave her!" Ethan cried, but the figure loomed closer, mouth gaping, as though it aimed to swallow her whole. Rebecca felt an icy breath brush against her skin, stirring panic within her soul. "Please!" she gasped, but her words fell into the abyss, unheard amid the chaos. The figure lunged, shadowy claws slicing through the air. Without thinking, she dove toward the light. A searing heat enveloped her like a shield, sending a shockwave that pushed the figure back. The moment grounded her, giving her focus and clarity. "Ethan!" She turned to see him, panic-stricken yet determined outside the door, fear etched deep in those innocent eyes. He was terrified, and it made her heart shatter. But there was no time for fear. Rebecca steadied her breath, locked her gaze on Ethan, and propelled herself forward with all her strength against the relentless pull of despair clawing at her. She felt the connection between them pulse like a lifeline. The promises lost, the futures stolen, they all clawed at her. But she had one thing left to give, a fierce love that could fuel her strength. With a primal scream, she connected with the light, and then everything shattered. What had felt like a tranquil embrace of light turned searing, splitting the shadows even further. The screams erupted into horror, peeling back layers of despair and rage, a cacophony of betrayal and sorrow as the figures in the mural howled their anguish. Shadows were forced back, retreating into the corners like frightened creatures. In that moment, a rift opened in the swirling darkness, revealing a flicker of memories preserved within the walls. Each flash was another soul bound in torment, each cry clawing at Rebecca's heart. They were souls that thanked her for her fight and urged her to keep going, their presence both haunting and empowering, but the darkness wouldn't let go easily. Noticing the crack in her resolve, it lashed out, thrashing like a wounded beast, desperate to reclaim what it lost. Rebecca could feel Ethan's hand reach out through the door, warm and steady against the swirling malevolence that threatened to consume her. The shadows writhed around the frame, hungry for a taste of the light. "Mom, I can't hold it. You have to come now," Ethan shouted, his voice tinged with panic. Gathering every ounce of strength, Rebecca tore herself from the void, pushing off an unseen weight. "I'm coming. Hold on." With a final push, she dove towards the door, the warmth drawing her closer as she felt the walls shake with rage. She invoked the light, claws of fear trying to seize her again as she felt the familiar warmth embrace her. "Ethan!" she cried, just as the darkness surged. Would they escape, or would this be the end? The darkness wavered. She could feel its fear, and then, amid it all, a deep rumble shook the very core of reality. A light enveloped them both, but at what cost? Were they truly free, or was that merely an illusion? Rebecca took one last look over her shoulder as the shadows screamed in fury, stumbling back. What now awaited them on the other side? What lay behind the fading echoes of that cursed place? The transition felt like a harsh slap. One moment, Rebecca was fighting the dark, and the next, she was catapulted into a surreal brightness. Her vision blurred as she stumbled forward, still clutching Ethan's hand. They landed on a cold, hard surface, and her heart raced. She sucked in breaths, trying to quell the panic that threatened to grip her again. "Mom!" Ethan's eyes searched hers frantically. Rebecca pulled him close, grounding herself in the warmth of his presence. Around them lay shadows, lingering wisps of darkness that flickered against the edges of their new world. The air was different here, thick, saturated with the smell of damp earth and decay. It felt oppressive, as if the shadows had followed them, crawling into this new space, desperate to reclaim their lost prey. "Where are we?" Ethan whispered, his voice breaking the fragile silence. "I don't know, but it's not safe." She scanned their surroundings, heart pounding. They stood in what looked like an abandoned structure, the walls adorned with fading murals that resembled those in the previous room. But these were worse. Depictions of despair played out in grotesque detail, scenes that twisted reality into something horrid. Her breath caught in her throat. A low growl resonated from the shadows behind them, chilling her to the bone. They weren't alone. The sound rolled like thunder, and in its wake, a figure slinked forward, a silhouette she barely recognized. It was similar to the dark creature that had attacked them before, but this rendition was far more horrifying. "Ethan, back away!" she shouted, fear clawing at her voice. But Ethan stood frozen, eyes wide with terror. She cursed herself for not being more convincing. Before she could lunge toward him, the figure lunged to a mass of shadow stretching with unnatural speed, its yellow eyes trained on her. Rebecca stumbled back, pulling Ethan with her just as the creature's south claw swung dangerously close, barely missing her cheek. "Run!" she screamed, urgency flooding her veins. They bolted, tearing away from the creatures that bubbled and surged like restless water. The ground echoed with their pounding footsteps, blending with the guttural growls of the things behind them. They twisted through narrow hallways, dodging twisted roots that groped toward them like skeletal fingers. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent, mingling with the growls, forming a chorus of anguish that threatened to drown out her thoughts. "Mom, I can't," Ethan gasped, breathless. She spun around, heart racing, the desperation in his wide eyes was ingrained in her soul. "It's fine, Ethan. Just keep moving." The lie tasted bitter. It was fine, they were losing ground, the hunger of the shadows palpable behind them. With a sudden burst of energy, she grabbed Ethan's hand and pulled him around another corner. They stumbled into a larger chamber. The gloom disappeared only for a moment, revealing jagged stone and the outlines of twisted pillars. This place felt different, charged, as if it waited with bated breath. As they entered, a flicker of light caught her attention. There, in the center, an ethereal glow pulsed. It seemed alive, like a heartbeat, and instinct drew Rebecca closer. Perhaps this was a way out, a way to escape the gnashing darkness. "Ethan, look!" she shouted, pointing. But before she could move another step, the walls began to twitch and bulge. The whispers reached a fever pitch, echoing a warning so powerful that it sent a shockwave through her. The glowing light flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced and writhed like serpents released from a cage. Something stirred deep within her, an ancient fear that tied her to the stories she heard as a child, whispered tales of retribution and darkness manifesting when least expected. But the choice was still hers. Did she dare reach for the light, or would they be consumed by the chaotic shadow that threatened to swallow everything whole? "Mom, what do we do?" Ethan's voice trembled, his trust heavy on her shoulders. "Trust me," she shouted, but doubts gnawed at her. Confidence. Was this really a way to salvation, or another trap designed to ensnare them deeper into the darkness? As the darkness twisted and surged, the ground beneath them trembled with ominous intent. The echoes of the horrors they had escaped began to merge with the light, creating a terrifying symphony of chaos and need. Yet it was just the beginning. What awaited them next in this realm of shadows? In a world where hope was fading, could courage still prevail? Rebecca staggered back, heart thundering, caught in the grip of indecision. The glow pulsed rhythmically, promising escape yet harboring a gnawing dread. The walls, undulating like a living entity, made the entire chamber feel alive, hungry, anticipating its next meal. "Mom, please." Ethan's plea pierced through the noise, raw and desperate. Each rippling shadow seemed to snarl in response, eager to consume them whole. "Stay close." Rebecca pulled him nearer, feeling the heat radiating from the light. It beckoned them, though every instinct screamed for her to run the other way. She could almost hear the tendrils of darkness whispering sweet nothings, trying to lure her into their embrace. "Run," she repeated, vision narrowing as the room twisted unnaturally. The shadows clawed at her, reaching out like grotesque hands filled with teeth, desperate to drag them down. With one last glance at the light, she turned on her heel and charged deeper into the labyrinthine corridors, urging Ethan to keep pace. Their footsteps echoed in the void, a haunting reminder of their frantic flight. The growls followed, relentless, growing louder as the shadows pressed closer, a pack of ravenous nightmares inching toward their prey. The doorways they passed seemed to warp and stretch, each revealing glimpses of horror beyond, tendrils of darkness wrapping around souls, eyes reflecting despair and dread. "Mom, I can't do this." Ethan gasped, his small hand trembling in hers. "Yes, you can. Just don't look back." Hope and fear blended in her chest, twisting her resolve. She gasped for breath, equally at risk of collapsing. The creatures were closing in, she could feel their breath, cold and rancid against her neck. They careened through a doorway, plunging into another room, this one smaller, tighter. Dim remnants of light fought to stay alive from a cracked ceiling far above, illuminating walls lined with grotesque carvings, each more ghastly than the last. Faces twisted in agony seemed to stare down, watching the horrors unfold with morbid curiosity. "There's no exit," Ethan cried, voice high with panic. "Not yet," she answered, scanning the walls for a sign, a crack, a hidden door. She felt it, a palpable sense of danger encroaching like a creeping fog, and still, the echoing growls converged behind them. Suddenly, one of the carvings caught her eye, a figure carved in stone, knelt as if in agony, its mouth open in a silent scream. "We have to go back," she shouted, pulling Ethan to a corner where shadows pooled heavy. "Why? It's the only way." She pressed against the wall, heart racing, scanning for any hint of salvation. The growls intensified, a guttural chorus hungry for flesh. A door, hidden behind a curtain of shadows, appeared. Its wood was warped, ancient, as if it had waited eons. "Mom, please. No more running." Her voice cracked, conviction roaring inside her. She grabbed the knob, hesitating for a brief heartbeat. Then, with a ferocity fueled by terror, she swung the door wide open. Light flooded in, blinding, seeping into the corners of her despair. Striving for clarity, she stepped into the radiant glow, pulling Ethan behind her. The darkness shrieked in outrage, resentful of its lost prey. But as they crossed the threshold, a weight bore down, the shadows grappling to pull them back. The whispers, now a deafening roar, screamed betrayal and fear. Then they stumbled into a vast expanse. The world outside was a graveyard of souls lost to time, haunting, silent, yet alive in despair. Echoing voices tore through the calm, wailing tales of torment. Rebecca gripped Ethan, panic rising again as she scanned the horizon for sanctuary. What had they entered? The air thrummed with malevolence, and shadows shifted around her like a hive of bees ready to swarm. "What do we do now, Mom?" Ethan trembled, eyes wide, disbelief staring back at her, mixed between hope and dread. "Stay close. We need to find a way out of here." She felt it again, a pull from the depths, something sinister lurking, waiting. Just waiting. Would they overcome this final grasp or be destined to join? The mournful cries echoing in this cursed realm. In this desolate purgatory, danger loomed just beyond sight. Would they be drawn into the madness, or could Rebecca find the strength to fight back? Ethan's breath hitched, the sound barely a whisper above the clamor of distant wails. Beneath their feet, the ground felt uneven, almost spongy, as if it throbbed with the life of unseen things. Rebecca glanced around, eyes straining against the oppressive gloom. There was no telling what lurked behind the veil of shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike. "Mom, what if they find us?" Ethan's voice trembled, fear kaleidoscoping across his features. "Shoo," she whispered, urgency flickering through her veins like electric current. The memories of the growls and shadows haunted her thoughts. "We need to keep moving." They advanced cautiously, every step a risk. The air was thick, heavy with despair, making her lungs ache. As they tread deeper, Rebecca felt an icy breath sweep past her shoulder, followed by a low, mocking laugh that scratched at her sanity. She could sense the entities swirling around them, unseen, hungry for their fear. Suddenly, something flickered in the corner of her eye, a flash of movement, the dark silhouette of a figure just beyond the reach of light. Rebecca squinted, pulling Ethan closer. "What did you see?" he whispered, his eyes wide. "Just stay behind me." She forced her feet to carry her forward, every instinct screaming at her to turn back. Ahead, a flickering light caught her attention, pulsing with the rhythm of her racing heart. A door. Hope ignited briefly within her. "Come on," she urged Ethan, pushing through the thick shadows, heading toward the glow. But as they drew nearer, the light warped and twisted. It became sickening, a false hope leading straight into the maw of darkness. "Mom, it's not right." Ethan clutched her arm, panic sizzling through him. She could feel it too, a dark aura seeping from the door. "Let us just check," she said, heart pounding against her chest like a caged animal. When she reached the door, it shuddered as though alive, the wood-weeping black tendrils that slithered and twitched. There was no handle. Just a void, beckoning and threatening. Before she could think, a twisted voice hissed from within. "Join us." The air around her vibrated with an unnatural force, and she staggered back, eyes wide. "Ethan, we can't." Before she could finish the thought, Ethan broke free from her grip. "I want to see." "No." The desperation in her voice sliced through the tension as she lunged forward, desperate to snag his wrist before he succumbed to the creeping shadows. But he was faster, slipping just beyond her grasp. Ethan edged closer to the looming door, captivated by the emanating glow. "Mom, it's beautiful." "No, Ethan." Rebecca screamed. Her heart clawed at her throat as fear ignited into a firestorm of panic, and she felt cold fingers gliding along her spine. "Innocents are valuable," the voice taunted once more, sultry and dark. She surged toward him, adrenaline surging, every instinct screaming. "Get away from there." But as she reached him, the twisted darkness arose, engulfing Ethan as he flinched. His scream, raw and horrified, echoed like a death knell. "Ethan." "No." She dove forward, limbs thrumming with terror as she pulled at the writhing shadows. They parted reluctantly, revealing her son, now transfixed, eyes glazed, his will bending to the dark power. "Mom, I feel it," he murmured, his voice barely his own. A chilling emptiness washed over him as his gaze turned toward her, searching yet vacant. "Ethan, fight it. You're stronger than this." Panic surged through her, a frenzied desperation flooding her senses, but the shadows reassembled, curling around him and drawing him away. The laughter crescendoed, mocking her helplessness. "Join us, or be lost forever." "No." Rebecca howled, lunging again, but the shadows flared, blocking her path. She felt the ground quake beneath her, an ominous heartbeat throbbing in tandem with the clamor all around. In the distance, more silhouettes emerged, haunting against the fading light, trapped souls, forever wandering this desolate expanse. In that moment of horror, she realized the inescapable truth: she had entered their domain. And now fighting wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about saving Ethan. Each second, another soul was drawn to the malevolent embrace. She could not let them take him. Before her eyes, the door began to seal shut, the light flickering out like a dying star. "Mom!" His desperate cries echoed, cutting through the suffocating darkness. With a heart full of fear and resolve, Rebecca lunged toward the door. Would she break through the shadows and save her son? Or would darkness claim both their souls, lost forever in the hellish embrace? A final decision loomed ahead, one that might shatter everything she believed in. The moment Rebecca lunged, time seemed to stretch into a cruel eternity. Her fingertips grazed the solid wood of the door, slick and cold beneath her grasp. The shadows around her pulsated, a living mass eager to snuff out her resolve. With every ounce of strength, she pushed the door shuttered as if resisting her touch, as if aware of the chaos it contained. "Ethan!" She screamed again, her voice cracking. The echoes of his cries ricocheted through the darkness, a haunting reminder of what was slipping away. The wall of shadows quivered, swirling with menace, its shadows writhing in an unholy dance around her. "Mom, I'm scared." Ethan's voice was tinged with confusion, caught in the throes of malevolent entrapment. "I know, sweetheart. Just hold on to me." But his talon-like grip on the void tightened, dragging him inch by inch into despairing darkness. Adrenaline surged through Rebecca. With a wild leap, she dashed for him, arms outstretched, eyes locked on her son. The air crackled like a storm, thick with despair and electric anticipation. In that frantic moment, the shadows shrieked a sound that twisted her insides, a cacophony of tortured souls clamoring for release. A pair of distant, glowing eyes turned toward her, piercing through the endless darkness. For a heartbeat, she was caught in their gaze, betwixt fascination and terror. "Join us," it rasped again, echoing around her like a chilling wind. The urging voice took on a sinister sweetness, beckoning her, promising another path, another life. But the realization sliced through her mind: a life away from her son was no life at all. "No." She choked out, halting her advance as the shadows lunged again. They surged around her, wrapping tightly, squeezing like a vice, and suddenly there was only Ethan, the yearning in his eyes dimming with each passing heartbeat. As she fought to fend off the shadows, she glimpsed the memories swirling in the darkness, silhouettes of lost children, faces contorted in anguish, trapped in an eternity of fear. It was then she understood they had once been like Ethan. Innocent. Vulnerable. She wouldn't let him slip away. "Ethan. Listen to me. I'm right here. You need to fight it." His glazed eyes flickered, a momentary battle flaring beneath the surface. "Mom, it hurts." Can't think. That cold grip tightened, and she couldn't let it win. She clawed her way through the darkness toward him, pulling at the tendrils wrapping around his limbs. Suddenly, a shock of clarity pierced the fog in Ethan's mind. "Mom!" he cried out, caught between worlds. "Help me!" With a last desperate gasp of air, she surged forward, feeling the shadows burn against her skin, raw and violent. She reached the doorway just as tendrils of darkness twisted back, trying to seal him behind them. The laughter filled the air, crescendoing into a frenzy of sound that threatened to shatter her will. Then, without thought, without reason, she grasped the deepest core of her being and summoned every shred of love she had for her son. It ignited within her a ferocious flame blazing against the cold despair. "Ethan! I will not abandon you!" she screamed, pouring her soul into the words. Silence hung for a heartbeat, and then something shifted. The shadows recoiled, twisting, losing their hold just as Ethan summoned the last vestige of his will. With a gasp, he flailed back toward her, clawing through the embracing darkness, their hands finally colliding. "Mom!" Relief, raw and powerful, flooded through him. But just as quickly, the door pulsated violently, shadows surging in an ominous wave, a tempest of darkness roaring back around them. With one final leap, Rebecca yanked Ethan through the threshold just as the shadows surged, receding yet determined to reclaim their prize. As the door slammed shut, a wicked laughter echoed from beyond, chilling her to her core. It wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. What was that? Ethan gasped, panic still clinging to his voice, chest heaving. I don't know," she whispered, heart racing. They stood in the thin shaft of light, an island in a sea of encroaching darkness. But in a chilling moment of silence, Rebecca felt the palpable weight of eyes upon them, always watching, always waiting. A glimmer appeared, a faint glow beyond the door they barely escaped, casting swirling shadows against the walls darkened by fear. A truth waited to be uncovered, and what awaited them beyond was more terrifying than anything they had ever faced. As the door shuttered, she knew they had only just begun. What else lurked inside the shadows? Would they have to confront the things they feared most? Rebecca's heart thudded in her chest like a war drum as her vision cleared, revealing a dim corridor strewn with shadows and echoes. She and Ethan stood just beyond a door that trembled ominously behind them. They had escaped, but the feeling of being hunted clung like a second skin. The haunting laughter from the shadows still echoed in her ears, a grim reminder of the darkness that waited for any sign of weakness. "Mom, what was that place?" Ethan asked, his voice shaking. She could see the panic etched in his face, the innocence of his youth wrestling with the horrors they had just faced. I don't know," she replied, swallowing hard. "But we need to keep moving." With a deep breath, she pushed through the thick gloom that pulsed around them, feeling an almost magnetic pull to press forward. The narrow corridor twisted like a serpent, dim light flickering at irregular intervals from overhead, casting sinister shapes on the walls. Each step felt treacherous, and she was painfully aware of the creeping darkness just behind them, impatient and brooding. "Stay close to me," she admonished Ethan, her voice low but firm. As they rounded a corner, Rebecca's eyes widened at the sight before them. A vast hall stretched out, walls lined with ancient markings that whispered of forgotten rituals and long-lost lives. The air was cooler here, almost a relief, but suffused with the scent of damp earth and decay. Flickering torches lined the walls like ghostly sentinels, lighting the way, yet casting deeper shadows in those corners that seemed to pulse with dark energy. "I can hear them," Ethan murmured, looking at her, his eyes wide with fear. "They're still here, aren't they?" "Yes," she confirmed, her heart heavy with the weight of their predicament. "But we can't let them get to us. We need to find some way out of here." Voices reached her ears, muffled but urgent, swirling like a tempest within her mind. Not just sounds but a plea, vast and endless. "Join us," it said in chorus, the shadows around them thickening in response. Rebecca felt a shiver course through her. They needed to break the cycle, they needed freedom for themselves and for the lost souls trapped in this eternal darkness. "There." Ethan pointed to a large stone archway at the far end of the hall, partially hidden by wisps of swirling darkness. "It looks like it goes outside." Rebecca nodded, but doubt crept in. "No matter what we see, no matter what we hear, we stay together, okay?" "Okay," Ethan whispered, determination flickering behind his fear. Together, they moved toward the archway, the oppressive weight of the shadows bearing down as they approached. Just as they stepped through into the new space, a wall of darkness surged behind them, a final attempt to swallow them whole. Rebecca felt a rush of wind against her back, and for a moment, time seemed to slow as they pushed forward. Bursting through the threshold, they were suddenly engulfed in blinding light. The warmth enveloped them, and Rebecca gasped, stumbling slightly. The world around them transformed into a lush landscape bathed in sunlight, vibrant with colors of wildflowers and grasses. It felt unbelievably stark compared to the bleakness that had just surrounded them. "I think we're free," Ethan breathed, eyes wide with disbelief and relief. But before she could feel her heart truly lighten, the shadows they had escaped began to pulse at the edge of the clearing, their forms writhing and looming. The laughter returned, haunting and bitter, a reminder that the darkness wasn't just a memory, it was still hunting for them. "Mom, they're still coming!" Ethan cried, and his voice broke through her thoughts, grounding her. "Look!" she shouted, pointing at a distant ridge where the sunlight sparkled against a flowing river. "We can hide by the water. Hurry!" They sprinted toward the riverbank, heartbeats loud in their ears as the shadows flew just behind, desperate to reclaim their lost prey. The water shimmered cool and inviting, a sanctuary whispered from childhood stories purifying and cleansing. "Jump!" she urged, taking Ethan's hand and leaping into the river. Cold water enveloped them, and for a moment, it felt as if time had broken. The shadows gnashed at the edge, their voices rising in frustration, but the river held a power the darkness could not penetrate. Gasping for air, they surfaced and turned to see the shadow figures retreating, a screech of rage echoing through the trees. The oppressive weight was lifting, crackling with the energy of release. "Did we really escape?" Ethan asked, disbelief mingling with relief. Rebecca pulled him close, tears brimming in her eyes. Yes, we did." But the echo of the haunting laughter persisted, fading but never quite gone. They still had scars to bear, stories etched in their hearts forever. "What now?" Ethan asked, voice trembling but filled with resolve. Rebecca looked around, taking in the life around them, the sun shining, birds singing, and wildflowers swaying gently in the breeze. "Now, we live. We take this strength and remember. We honor those who couldn't escape while making sure we never forget." Together, they began to walk along the riverbank, leaving behind the shadows that tried to claim them, ready to face a new day filled with hope and light. With every step away from the darkness, the weight of fear began to lift. Together, they would carry on, letting love and perseverance guide their way, knowing that no shadow could ever extinguish their light. As they walked toward the horizon, Rebecca felt a flicker of warmth, the dawn of a new beginning waiting just beyond the edge of the sunlight. Now listen up, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and keep these tales alive. Make sure to flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending, because I want to hear from real fans like you. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion.